Welcome to the Crypto Compliance Podcast by Gatenox.
Pawel Kuskowski, welcome in Crypto Compliance by Gatenox, where compliance experts and practitioners are meeting to discuss current market events and general compliance aspects. We promote the highest compliance standards in crypto, bringing interesting topics and talk about practical issues. I would like to ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave your comment and share it. Let's together promote compliance culture in crypto and Web3. Please also check our website, Gatenox.com. Gatenox is the fast, network, and tailored corporate KYC solution. With Gatenox, you can onboard corporate clients by working in a trusted and compliant ecosystem with Web3 capabilities. In this episode, I had the pleasure to speak with Lee Schneider. Lee is a financial services and technology lawyer based in New York. He serves as a general counsel for Ava Labs, a leading blockchain software company. Lee has been involved in many significant projects in fintech and blockchain space, including some of the largest and most popular token sales. He also co-hosts a fintech podcast with former SEC Commissioner Troy Parades, available on iTunes and other podcast services. During today's session, we spoke about Binance and the recent SEC complaint, why Solana is not a security, and what are the three main use cases in blockchain. Thank you. Hi, Lee. Great to have you here in Crypto Compliance by Gatenox. Obviously, you've been a great lawyer for the crypto industry and also general counsel, most recently general counsel of the couple of projects which I know, which is the Ava Labs, and also I know you from Block One, right? Historically,
right.
And I think you've been a founder of Genesis. So what was your transition from the, let's say, legal lawyer work into the crypto world, the crazy crypto world?
Yep. And thanks a lot for having me on. This is really great. I appreciate the invite, and I appreciate the kind words at the beginning there. Just to be clear, so I was a co-founder of a company called Genesis Block. It's a small consulting firm in the blockchain and crypto space. We had high ideals for all kinds of things we were going to do, but we made the mistake of being too early. And so we didn't really get the traction that we had hoped. But so the Genesis folks obviously are a much bigger company, and that's nothing to do with me. I originally started following Bitcoin back in 2013, 2014 timeframe, mostly because I was very interested in the technology and interested in this idea that you can create digitally unique items. I didn't start mining Bitcoin, unfortunately, back then, but that's okay. And as I concentrated on the technology and I did a lot of reading and everything, I got really interested in what was going on. Ethereum came around. I got interested in what Ethereum was doing and how that was different from Bitcoin. And so in early 2016, I was a lawyer at a law firm, and I just sort of said, you know what, I'm going to go out and try to get clients who are doing this blockchain stuff. And so I started spreading the word and going to meetups and other things like that. And I got lucky with a couple of early clients, including some work that I did for Coinbase way back in 2016 on the original securities law framework for blockchain tokens. And ever since then, I've just been dedicating myself to what's going on in blockchain and tokenization, Web3, all of the stuff that's happening. But I trace that back to the fact that for the first time in my life, I saw the potential of the technology beyond the initial use cases of, Bitcoin as an alternative currency, Ethereum as gas on the Ether as gas on the Ethereum network. And I realized that tokenization of assets, this idea that you can have digitally unique items and therefore you can tokenize anything, that really captured my imagination. And that's why I have been and still am very enthusiastic about what I do.
Even if we see what's happening with the Security Exchange Commission and Binance, yesterday's complaint, I think that's actually playing back to everything what we've been worried in the industry, what's going to happen, and frankly speaking, today I just made a note on LinkedIn on kind of my view on what's happening. And I had so many different comments on WhatsApp, Telegram, with people who are concerned, where is it going? And, is actually SEC going to out-regulate Binance out of existence? What's your view on this, considering your perspective?
Sure. And to be honest, I have not had a chance to read the Binance complaint yet. That's one of the downsides of having a full-time job. I can't read everything exactly when I want to. But look, at a high level, first of all, Binance is a global company and it's operating in many markets. There are, as you know, many, many jurisdictions that have crypto asset regulation and can regulate an entity like Binance. So is Binance going to go out of existence? I find that hard to believe. I guess it's possible, but I find that hard to believe just because they seem to be operating in many, many other jurisdictions. And again, as I said, there's many countries that have crypto asset regulation. Japan, I think, was the first major jurisdiction with comprehensive crypto asset regulation way back in the spring of 2016. So the Japanese have recognized this marketplace and what's going on. More specifically, I think, and I have been very public about the fact that I think most blockchain tokens are not securities. I've published a couple of articles on this topic, and worked with a lot of people, a lot of other lawyers on this topic over the course of time. I think, one of the ideas that is constantly floated out there of, all tokens are securities here in the US really misses the big picture of what's going on with tokenization. And tokenization of assets, that is to say, creating digitally unique representations of bundles of rights, that can be anything. And we see that with NFTs like Bored Apes and Fart Jars. We see that with governance tokens, which is just a voting right. A couple of years ago, I got the right to vote on whether Lay's potato chips would have a dill pickle flavor, which I voted heavily in favor of. And I'm pleased to say that I very much enjoy the Lay's dill pickle chips. But nobody's running around saying that right to vote like that is a security. And so we know that not all tokens are securities. As we see greater tokenization of stocks and bonds and other traditional financial instruments, those things will be governed by existing traditional financial instrument regulation. That's not going to change. But the area that's the most interesting to the regulators is crypto assets that are not representations of traditional types of assets. And we see that as the pain point here in the US. Many other jurisdictions have figured it out, but we haven't got there yet. And Congress is holding lots of hearings. There are draft bills floating around, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So I see a big mix of things happening here in the US that hopefully is going to get us to a good place.
But why do you think we have this confusion? Because this is like big confusion. We have so many voices which is saying and we can see this also in this Binance, SEC versus Binance, that, Solana is treated as, security. And why I completely agree with you that we can bundle different rights, NFTs, whatever we call this, it's actually representation of certain rights. Why do you think there is this confusion of, what's security and what is not security?
I think that's a great question you're asking, Pawel. And I think it goes back to the fact that people sort of don't keep in mind what the problem is that blockchain solves. Actually, three big problems. Blockchains solve three big problems in computer science that have been around since the 1960s. They solve the problem of how do you get a diverse number of computers to agree on a common data set. They solved the problem of how do you create digitally unique items. And they solved the problem of how do you establish and transfer ownership of digitally unique items.
Yeah.
And right, those were three problems that had been around. Computer scientists had been grappling with those problems. There were some solutions to the first problem, but those solutions were susceptible to fat finger mistakes and hardware going down and hacks and things like that. Along comes Satoshi in 2008 in an 8-page white paper, solves all three of those problems at once, right? This is a big deal. And I think people fail to recognize that this is a step forward in computer science as a whole. It's not just a step forward in creating and maintaining information about financial instruments. And so that's why we're seeing projects that are trying to tokenize identity. That's why we're seeing gaming projects that, use NFT technology to create digitally unique in-game items. That's why the list goes on and on and on about the different ways that companies are using blockchains and tokenization, that using this core concept of being able to create digitally unique items and establish ownership of them and transfer that ownership, and doing it across a wide network of computers that's called the internet, right? These are game-changing innovations, and people are forgetting that broader activity is going on, and they're just focused on a narrow slice of what's been possible, in part because, quite honestly, the developers and the users in blockchain were originally focused on that narrow slice. But now we are so much broader. And so saying things like all tokens are securities it just does not make sense anymore. And just one last point, I heard that Solana is named Sol is named as a security in the Binance complaint. I wrote an article about a year ago in Crowdfund Insider called "Oranges Are Not Securities and Neither Is Sol," and I lay out what the Howey test says in actuality. I lay out how that was reiterated in another Supreme Court case called Edwards in the early 2000s, and I talk about why the correct interpretation is also the sensible interpretation. And so I think that kind of reasoning, that kind of rigorous legal analysis is needed here, rather than just these broad statements that are patently incorrect.
And I listened to the Mavericks, which you've done with Joey Garcia, and I think this is excellent. And this question about oranges are not securities, and the second, super pro Joey asking super pro blockchain anti crypto, right? So, but coming back to what you said, I think it's I completely agree with you in the sense that blockchain is the main purpose of blockchain is actually making sure that we have, proper tools to establish who is the owner of specific, digital item, and transferring this. I completely agree. And this, like the sole purpose and the only purpose probably which is applicable, and it's which is critical also to the growth of internet. Like how you. I mean, right now with AI, how are you going to trace, this is going to be really tricky, like how are you going to trace the rights of different, things that you produce, like the guy who is, I think there was on the photo stock or something like this, the guy who was photographer, who published his pictures there. And suddenly he realized that, ChatGPT is actually taking these pictures and, presenting as their own creation, right? And they're charging for this. And, so this is going to be really area when, but it's also, the interesting part. There's not so many projects which in crypto, which would be focusing on this particular item. You can say that everyone is focusing on this item, but at the same time, no one is focusing on this item. And I think what you said about that's interesting, because I've been on the London blockchain conference last week, which was heavily focused on around
right.
BSV, and there's like the main theme there was about rights and IP rights, all the rights, digital rights being transferred via the blockchain. But I remember this. I'm sure you do as well. We have this conversation since 2016, right? It's not something which would be fully, okay, you have NFTs, but NFTs is like why it's not happening, like in much broader, scope, this implementation of this is the digital rights. We transfer this, through blockchain, on blockchain representation, all this stuff. Why is it not picking up?
It's a great question. And I'm not sure I know the full answer. I will say that as with any new technology, it does take time for people to adapt and understand and figure out the use cases that their company wants to make with the technology. I do think we see a lot of experimentation in those areas now, and it's that experimentation that, to my mind, is going to drive the next wave of uses and products and services based on blockchains. I also think that people are learning about what it means to have something on a public permissionless network, right? Something that just exists on the internet and is not controlled by a central party.
Yeah.
And that's a challenging concept for people to understand. We are so used to thinking about the world in terms of who controls a thing, whether it's a physical asset or an intangible asset, and coming to grips with the idea that nobody controls a thing, that there's no help desk you can call to fix something for you. That's a brave new world for a lot of people, myself included, by the way. And I'm very shy about, I know the mantra, not your keys, not your crypto.
Yeah.
But I'm still very shy about trusting myself to use my keys and not mess things up. So look, the world is changing at a very fast pace, and it's going to take people time to adapt. So to my mind, that's one of the major reasons why we haven't seen more widespread adoption and more widespread use of the different things that are going on in blockchain.
So that's UX UI in terms of how you interact with blockchain. Do you think that's the main reason? Okay,
I think it's partly UX UI, but I also think that companies that would like to use blockchain are still learning about the technology, still figuring out what it makes sense for them to do with the technology, et cetera, et cetera. And that takes time, right? A perfect example is I read that Apple had their WWDC yesterday, and they introduced their VR headset. I know that they don't want to call it VR headset or whatever, but right. Look, VR headset ideas have been around for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Apple didn't introduce one until just now because they wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with the technology and could implement it in a way that meets their needs, meets their customers' needs. And I think we're seeing the same thing in blockchain. And that's why there's a lot of experimentation, which I think is good. That's super positive. But there's also some hesitancy as people learn to understand how the technology works and what its capabilities are, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, and you are veteran in crypto, right? I think like 7 years in crypto, it means you are veteran, right? We can call you like
I guess
this.
so.
Yeah, and you are in Ava Labs at the moment, building solutions for, effectively for the Web3 crypto ecosystem.
That's right.
So you see a lot of projects, right? You see a lot of, let's say, economy being built around, crypto Web3. Where do you think is the next phase of, this market going? Is it like identity? Is it security? Or is it still, okay, let's issue token? I think, there's like 24,000 tokens at the moment, which is pretty scary, right?
Yep.
So where do you think is the next, where are we going next as an industry?
So I would point to three trends, but again, I'm just a lawyer, so don't look to me as somebody who's prognosticating.
We need to have lawyers view as well. I think like it's not only technologists.
That's right. So I'll point to three things. One, I think we're going to continue to see the gaming businesses grow in blockchain and crypto. I think this idea of tokenizing in-game assets and making them transferable from one game to another and creating gigantic universes where people can participate in different on different planets in different planes of existence, whatever they're called in these gaming universes. I think there's a lot of really interesting things to be done there. I also think in that gaming context, the idea of DAOs in the game and creating whole political systems using DAOs and voting tokens and things like that in games.
In the game, right?
In the game, yeah, right. We'll create
how it
some
would work?
really interesting things.
So how do you think it would work?
So I'll use a very simplistic example, right? Let's say that there are two planets in the universe, and each planet has a couple of countries on the planet. So, right, you could have a DAO for the voters of each country. You could have a DAO for the parliaments or congresses or whatever the legislatures are called, and so you could implement different political ideas. You could implement different laws and rules to govern your particular country, your particular planet. You can see all kinds of interesting things happening there, mimicking what goes on in the real world, right?
So would you like
in the
to have,
United States?
vote, government which is run by 16-year-olds down from the basement? That's because this is like, I don't know if you you probably saw it. In Avalanche event in Barcelona, right? There's this gaming stand. These are 90s games, right? The games which were played in 90s. Why do you think? It's like it's you need to really willing to play this game for the benefits as opposed to anything else, right? As opposed to simply enjoy the game. Why we don't have any meaningful game yet in this context, or any meaningful game actually applying NFTs or assets creation with blockchain?
It's a great question, and I will confess that I'm not much of a gaming guy. When I grew up, I can still remember when Brian Schwartz got Pong when I was a little kid, and that was like the biggest event in my neighborhood, and everybody wanted to go over to his house and play Pong. I can remember going to video arcades and playing all of the classic video games, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Centipede,
it's coming
Millipede,
back with NFT.
all of those classic games are coming back, right? So I'm still stuck in that gaming world. I have not advanced to the true online gaming worlds of the first person shooters and all these other games. So I'm the wrong person to ask about that. I think there are so many possibilities that people can explore, and I think actually it's probably pretty cool if 16-year-olds or 14-year-olds learn what it's like to run a body politic through voting tokens and simulations in an artificial or virtual world. So I think there are a lot of really interesting things that people can do through through gaming. And so I sort of see gaming as obviously great form of recreation, but also as a testing ground to see like what things work and what things don't work and what things people want and what they don't want, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think gaming is a big deal. The second one I would point to is just generally financial instruments and traditional financial instruments being brought on chain. I think there are great use cases for stocks and bonds and swaps and other financial instruments to be traded on chain, to be traded using DEXs and lending protocols and all of the things that are being developed in DeFi. So I see that trend as something that will take off over the course of the next couple of years. We at Ava Labs are certainly believers in that trend. And I do think that the efficiencies that are offered using blockchain technology and DEX and other DeFi technologies make a lot of sense for the traditional financial services world. The third trend that I would point to is the digital identity point that you made before. I think as we spend more and more time running around the world with these things, having our identity on these things is more and more sensible, and figuring out how to really create digital identity so that when I travel to a foreign country, I don't need to bring my physical passport. I can bring my digital passport. When I'm driving my car, I don't need to carry my physical driver's license. I can carry my digital driver's license. And expanding beyond that, in the different things that I do and like, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a lot of possibilities for that as well.
And I think on the financial side, financial instruments, I was very skeptical around MiCA, right? This is something that I said, it's going to kill the market. But it's funny, in the last month, I've been approached by so many projects which are being built on the basis of MiCA, building exactly what you said, transferring, bonds, stocks, or private shares into blockchain, trading them, creating market, creating liquidity, which I don't think is going to happen in the US, considering what's happening right now. So maybe we are in this situation, but things going to be suddenly moving much faster in Europe and slightly slower in the US in this regard. And there's a couple of points on this. Some people say that it's done because SEC is trying to protect equity market. Anything which is in competition to this existing infrastructure, it's gonna be risky for the entire economy, right? Where in Europe there is effectively no equity market, right? So there is, if there is some new asset class which is similar to equity which is being traded, it's effectively good for the European market. What's your view on this? Do you think it's the right direction, or?
So I don't know if it's the right direction or the wrong direction. I do think it's an inevitable direction. And I think Europe has recognized that. They have the DLT pilot program, which is all about experimenting with traditional MiFID financial instruments. MiFID is the Market in Financial Instruments Directive in Europe, governs trading and other activities in traditional financial instruments. The DLT pilot is supposed to work on ways to move those traditional financial instruments into blockchain and tokenized assets. There's the sandbox that Europe has just introduced that I think is also going to accommodate lots of different possibilities for tokenization of traditional financial instruments. I know there's a number of other countries that are also experimenting with these things. We see, frankly, that experimentation with central bank digital currencies as well. So I think all of these things are inevitable just because of the efficiencies that will come from using blockchain and smart contract and tokenization technologies. So for me, it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of seeing how the different actors in these existing ecosystems adopt and adapt to blockchains and tokenization.
And do you think, from what you said, if we put anything which is, similar to securities or equities on the centralized exchanges, I mean, what's your view? And it's, not treating this as a legal advice. Do they need to follow AML compliance, KYC rules, or they can be carved out in some way? And what would be the predicaments to actually, not being captured by this?
So I actually think this is a place where the tokenization of traditional financial instruments is going to meet the digital identity, and that will provide ways for trading on decentralized platforms to occur, so that you can still be in compliance with AML KYC requirements and other jurisdiction-specific requirements. I also think that the era of customized blockchains and customized smart contracts is coming fast. One of the things about the Avalanche technology that we work with is the capability to do subnets, which are customized blockchains. And so you can customize everything about it. You can have complete programmability. You can create whatever rule set you want to create. So you can have a subnet for trading US equities, a separate subnet for trading Hong Kong equities, a separate subnet for trading European equities, separate for Japanese equities, Korean equities, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we look at customization of blockchains and customized rule sets, which, by the way, they use in gaming too, right? This is not just traditional financial services stuff here. That's where I see a lot of potential development as well.
Yeah, and I think the way I'm thinking about this, in Gatenox as well, it's like we building, components which we can use and reuse within the Web3, like identity, corporate identity, smart contract, which is communicating and transferring, credentials, from one side to another. And then we have the other side, which is smart contract, which is talking. Do you think we are able to create ecosystem where it's fully compliant at the same time? No one is, like in terms of definition, no one is obliged party or obliged entity in this sense. So nobody has strict requirements to comply with AML, but at the same time, the entire ecosystem, we have KYT, know your transaction, blockchain analytics, all these puzzles connected and work in cooperation.
I think conceptually that is possible. I don't know how the actual implementation works, and I would need to think that through pretty carefully and talk with technologists pretty carefully. But look, I think that's a world that we can move to. There are, by the way, some downsides to that world, right? And we need to be careful about people's privacy. We need people to be careful about their own privacy. And so there are a bunch of different factors at play here, a bunch of different policy questions at play here. But yes, I definitely see that as one possibility for the future.
Okay. I think in terms of privacy, there is a way to construct this much more private and much more secure than existing, and I love the idea that you own your credentials, right? You share where it's needed.
Yes.
It doesn't stay
Yes.
with anyone. It's simply yes, no answer in zero knowledge proof, way. And we have this, are you on the sanction list, right? Yes, no. I mean, obviously,
Right.
it's a shortcut in terms of thinking, right? But at the same time, I think this is really. But why do you think? I mean, it's not happening, as fast as we expect. My take on this is that there's too many technologists who are building beautiful technology, but not so. I mean, completely not understanding the compliance and legal problems.
I think that's a good observation. I also think that there are a lot of technical challenges to doing this that people didn't anticipate. So conceptually, it's would be wonderful if I could control which bits of my identity are being used at any particular moment. But that requires me to take a lot of effort and do a lot of things and make sure I'm calibrating in particular situations. Or my identity has to be programmed to recognize all of those situations and determine on its own what would be shared and what would not be shared. By the way, maybe this is a place where AI intersects with digital identity, and we can get some AI that I can tell, hey, AI bot, please make sure that you enforce these rules around identity sharing. And if you get confused, call me and I'll tell you what to do, right? Or notify me and I'll type in what to do. So I think we're on the cusp of a lot of things here, but I think you're right that there are challenges to get the compliance right, especially because the compliance is often jurisdiction specific. And there are also technical challenges to get the fullest functionality that people are looking for.
Okay, and do you think AI? You mentioned AI. Do you think AI is going to steal the attention of developers at the moment, or are we still going to keep momentum in terms of people who are interested? Because my bet on crypto was based, also on how many smart people in the industry, in crypto industry you have. But do you see shift, like people moving from crypto into other areas, or we just maintain the momentum in crypto and keep it growing?
It's a great question. I think people who start out in crypto probably will spend a lot of time there. There will, of course, be people who get interested in other things and start doing other things. That's frankly been the story of my career as a lawyer. I've always sort of migrated to different things that I've found interesting, all within the context of being a lawyer, but right, working on different types of projects and doing different types of things. So, it's a very interesting question. And by the way, there's probably other technologies that are out there that we're not even considering that computer scientists and computer engineers and developers, et cetera, are thinking about and interested in. So I think that's a possibility. I will say that, with blockchain as sort of a base layer protocol, it allows you to build lots of different things on top of it. And so there should be room for you to be a blockchain person and also a gaming person, a blockchain person and also a, stock trading person, et cetera, et cetera. And so that should also happen with regard to AI.
Where do you see the biggest threats in terms of regulatory compliance aspects for the industry? What's in terms of, is it mindset or is it regulation or lack of regulations? What's your view on this?
I frankly think that we need goodwill actors all the way around. We need stakeholders to be good, to act with goodwill. And that goes for the developers and the people creating the projects. That goes for the regulators and the policymakers. That goes for the lawyers and the compliance people. That goes for all of the people associated with the ecosystem. I think the more good actors we attract, the more positive people with a vision for the future and the idea of solving problems instead of creating problems. To me, that's what's going to push things forward the best way. And sure, there's going to be some rough edges and there's going to be figuring things out. But if we have people of goodwill operating on all sides, those things will get figured out.
I'm just worried about, that there will be a lot of good players, but we have like two, outliers which are completely, trying to abuse this ecosystem, which we, in 2022, we had so many of those, right? Suddenly, it's probably you didn't touch Luna or, Celsius or, FTX or anything like this, because I think, like from the compliance perspective, it's like very, very risky or, almost not accessible, right? But there's many people who did. And I think, this tarnish our, industry reputations for sure. So I think, this is something, and it's hard work to almost like someone else is, doing some silly stuff, and the good players, us, we are trying to work this out again, right? So that's something right. which is I think hard work before us.
I think that's exactly right, but I will say that happens in every industry, as far as I know. There are always outliers. There are always people who, by the way, super positive outliers who come up with brilliant ideas and push the world forward in a really positive direction, but also the outliers who are doing it for, whatever bad reasons, nefarious reasons. And blockchain and crypto is no different. We just need to really continue to incentivize the good actors, because if we create too many disincentives for the good actors, only the bad actors will be left. And that's not a world 100%. That I want to live in.
So how do you want to incentivize good actors in this context?
Well, I think there's a number of ways to do it. I think, regulatory clarity like MiCA and the regulations in many other jurisdictions is very helpful. I think programs where governments and the private sector experiment with blockchains and learn how to use them and work together to develop use cases and things like that are big positives. I think ecosystems need to have incentives for good actors to join those ecosystems and participate. And so I think there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. I will say that trying to come up with just one or a handful of solutions is probably not going to work. We need to continue to be adaptable, and we need to continue to think and watch what's happening so that the good actors can continue to thrive.
Lee, thank you very much for your time. It's been excellent. I think that's very, very good closing note. So that's excellent.
Thank you. No, this is great. I really enjoyed our conversation, and it's every time I run across people like you, I am heartened by what's going on and who's participating. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Crypto Compliance, brought to you by Gatenox.